Welcome back, Keepin It Rural listeners. We are excited for a very against the grain podcast today with our friend Justin Wulf. Justin grew up on a seedstock cattle operation, but in high school, he decided that the shop was his future, not the farm. Justin went to school for welding and then entered the trades where his talent is widely known and is pretty amazing. And I'm going to have him come to my school and show me how. He has a passion for challenge and certainly has some inspiration to share with others, even though his modesty will be apparent. Justin, we are so excited and welcome to the pod. We are excited to hear more about your path and encourage the young people listening to follow their gut and live their dream. So Justin, knowing that information, you grew up on a seedstock cattle operation. Was it hard to do something that was different from the family business?
So when I grew up, I always had a little bit more of a mechanical inclination. I was always interested in the way stuff works. I liked cattle. It wasn't that I didn't like them. It was just the mechanical side of things was more interesting to me. It was more my passion. I did all the normal cattle stuff as a kid growing up on a cattle operation, the judging teams and the knowledge bowls and all that stuff. I enjoyed my time doing it. It's just the scale of that operation wasn't my calling, and I got into working with my hands and I found out that I really enjoyed it. It wasn't a hard transition. And when I first got into the trades, I always had the thought that I would get back into the farm at some point, and that just never really happened.
Yeah. And that's probably okay though, too.
It is. And the fact that I'm not there today doesn't bother me, and it doesn't affect me. It's just my path was different, and that's okay. And we need people in all sectors of agriculture, not just production.
Absolutely. And you're a great advocate for that. Why did you think that you were going to go back to the farm someday?
That's what people in my family did.
Yeah.
That's just what happened.
Mm-hmm.
With a lot of my cousins that were older than me, that was the natural progression. And they might go out and work for a little while, but usually they ended up coming back. And I was one of the ones that didn't.
Yeah. Was there ever a moment where you realized, like, yep, I'm not going to be the one that goes back? And how did you decide that?
I don't know if there was a defining moment. Through the progression of college and learning things that I didn't know existed, it became more apparent that there's a lot more to welding than I realized when I went into welding.
So how did you first get interested in welding?
I started at a cabinet shop, actually. I never took a metal shop class in high school. I was a wood shop kid, and because I enjoyed that teacher. I enjoyed the way he taught and everything I could learn from him. And I worked in a cabinet shop in high school. And leaving high school, there was an opportunity to do a tuition reimbursement program for a manufacturer. And I kind of had the feeling, I liked welding as a high schooler too. I just didn't take the classes. And then I realized that welding would be a lot more transferable back to the farm than cabinetry would. That just seemed to be the most beneficial if I was going to go back and farm. And then when I went to school, and I actually took a 2-year welding program instead of the traditional 10 months or 1 year. And I learned a lot, and it opened my eyes to a lot of possibilities.
Where did you go to be trained? And talk about fabrication and how you decided what path.
I went to Ridgewater and Wilmer. It was a 2-year program, like I said. The first year focused on welding and a lot of the basic knowledge of all the different processes. But then that second year of the program, we had a lot of students that just took 1 year, but I stuck around for both years. That second year was a lot of fabrication, a lot of machining, a lot of computer work, drafting and that sort of thing, and pipe welding, tube welding for food industry, that kind of thing. So that second year is what really opened my eyes to the possibilities of where this industry can go and where you can go in this kind of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And welding is an industry that no matter how much it has stayed the same, it's always evolving. So I'm guessing your learning didn't stop there. What opportunities have you taken to continue learning and growing your skill set?
That's the best part about it. There's always things to learn. A lot of the new welding machines, you buy the basic machine and then you buy the features you want as software add-ons. There's just so much. There's so many different processes, so many specialty things, so much specialized stuff. I read a lot. I read some trade magazines, and they cover a lot of that oddball stuff that I am probably never going to see, but it's fascinating stuff. The robotics have gotten huge. the advanced processes as far as different types. It's not just a simple wire feed weld anymore. Now there's different types of metal deposition that weren't possible 10 years ago, and different just software changes, programming of the machine and how it does its thing has all evolved even in the past 10 years, and it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you were to bring it back to the basics, because from a high school perspective, so many of our kids start out and they're just learning the basics. What would you say are still some of the basics that, regardless of the technology, are staying the same, that kids should know, that people in the industry should know?
The one thing that I tell high schoolers is that don't underestimate the importance of your math classes. As much as we don't like them, the math doesn't change, and the math is still very necessary. It just, as simple as reading a tape measure is very important. A lot of the techniques are still basically the same. They change slightly with the various process enhancements, but a lot of the basic techniques and the motion skills, the smooth motions, the repetitive motions, those types of things have stayed mostly the same. The processes have changed, but the technique is still, the hand-eye coordination and technique is still pretty similar to what it used to be.
There's a lot of repetition that comes into play. The number one thing I hear from my students is, oh, we have to go in the shop again. It gets so boring just laying bead after bead, but that's what makes you a better welder. So what do you got to say about, I mean, there's got to be some point where it's not repetitious anymore.
It is repetitious. The traditional American thinking is that it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill. And the Japanese actually have a term called takumi, and that is a master craftsman that has taken 60,000 hours to master their skill. And they become a craftsman at one tool. So it's like there's a master of the saw, or there's a master of the plane, and they master one tool. That's 30 years of a working career.
Right.
Even with 10,000 plus hours under my belt, I'm still refining my skills and practicing every day. So
yeah, patience is key there.
Yep.
So will you chat a little bit about kind of your path? So my dad did a 2-year program similar to you, left after he graduated, went into welding cranes for American Hoist, and now is self-employed. So very similar path to you. Talk about how easy, hard the challenge is, how scary that was.
I did 2 years of college or welding school, and then I went and worked for a guy right out of college that actually does very similar work to what I do now. I worked for him for a year and a half, and then I got married and moved. When I was moving, I was looking for a job, and I actually ended up working for a commercial plumbing and heating company, mechanical contractor. And through them, I was able to do a 4-year pipe fitter's apprenticeship. And then after that apprenticeship, I became a journeyman pipe fitter. And after a year of being a journeyman, the guy that was above me was retiring. So I was kind of forced, and it was a good thing, but I got to go take my master pipe fitters test at 27. So that was awesome. That was a plus. It was definitely the right move at the time. It was pretty intimidating, but it was a great opportunity. And I actually talked about going into business for myself straight out of welding school. And looking back, I'm very thankful I didn't, because I wouldn't have the opportunities I have today. It would have really limited what I can do.
For sure.
Yeah.
You talked about being a master pipe fitter. What does that mean, and what all goes into it?
So it's different in every state, but the state of Minnesota has what's called a high pressure pipe fitter's license. It's similar to your plumber's license or your electrician's license, but it's just a state licensing classification that says that this person knows how to do their job. With pipe fitters, it's a 4-year apprenticeship minimum. Plumbers, it's 8,500 hours, so real similar. You do the apprenticeship, you learn as much as you can, and then you go take a test. And once you pass the test, you become a journeyman. There's a lot of people that stay a journeyman forever. You can retire that way, or you can get a master pipe fitter's license. The master license is what's required to be in charge of that segment of the business. So when I was working for the commercial plumbing contractor, I was their master pipe fitter in charge of all the piping that happened in their business, all that high pressure piping. State of Minnesota qualifies 15 PSI and up steam or any ammonia refrigeration as high pressure piping. So that's what my license qualifies me for.
Is that a lot of what you do now?
It changes. Sometimes it's all I do for months on end, and there's other times where I don't touch it for 6 months. So it's definitely not all I do, but it can be a lot of what I do at some points.
Talk about your business a little bit. What do you do and how diverse are you?
The business is my wife, Brittany, and I. So we're considered a mechanical contractor. We're licensed as a mechanical contractor, which is kind of like a plumbing company or a heating company, but we're not specific. We're not plumbers. Plumbers deal with water and waste, and pipe fitters do everything else. And that's the simple way to explain it. And mechanical contractor is kind of like your heating and cooling contractors, but we stick more with the steam, the gas, a lot of gas piping, like fuel gas piping, natural gas piping inside buildings has to be welded just because of certain pipe sizes. Anything larger than 2-inch pipe has to be welded by code. So we do quite a bit of that. And then we're also a job shop, which means we do specialty manufacturing, small runs, very limited quantities. We do a lot of single piece jobs where we're just making one of something. We're not doing 10,000 parts of anything. We're doing 1 to 20 typically. A lot of what we've done with that has been stainless and aluminum. We've done some steel. We even get into the repair stuff. We'll do farm repairs
You
and
will do custom, huh?
oh yeah, we've done quite a bit of heavy equipment stuff, excavators and scrapyard equipment and just general repair type stuff. We've done our fair share of livestock handling equipment. That's the industry I come from, so it's pretty easy to relate to those customers. Gates and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's very diverse and it makes it fun because it's always something different. Very little repetition.
Yeah.
There you go, kids. It's not always repetitious.
Yeah, it makes the days go faster.
Did you have any unexpected or interesting projects that have come your way that you're like, wow, never thought I'd be doing this?
There's always something. I built a mailbox for Santa Claus. That
Yes.
was a fun one.
Awesome.
I've gotten to build a hand sink for the Minnesota Zoo, which
Oh,
was
that's
unexpected.
cool.
A former coworker works for the plumbing department up there, and they needed a sink in short order. So that was a fun one. I just delivered a really fun one today, and I don't have permission to talk about it yet. I got to do a little bit of pipe welding in a university disease research lab that was going up. So that was pretty cool. It was definitely something to see. It was an
I
experience.
bet. As long as they all stay contained, right?
Yeah.
It was new. It was all new. So there was
Oh,
no
it's you.
And no exposure yet.
no exposures. We've done some work at another university where their power plant, they have a campus-wide power plant that supplies all heating and cooling, and their power plant is actually listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It's really cool. Some of it comes down to it's almost antique type
Yeah.
stuff, and we get called to work on it. So it's pretty cool.
Does that raise the anxiety or the tension when you go to weld and you're like, oh gosh, can't screw this one up?
Not really. There's been those projects. There's been, those projects exist, but typically on that stuff, the parts we're working on have been updated. We're not working on the old equipment. A lot of the old equipment might still just be in place just for historical effect and not actually in use.
From a technical perspective too, when you go in and you do these jobs, because it sounds like you travel for some of these too, do you prepare for those? Do you lay a few like practice welds and try to mimic what you're going to do on the actual product, or do you just go for it?
Depends on what it is. If it's a new material or a really strange joint design or something like that, we'll definitely brush up. Or if it's, I wouldn't even say if it's a tight spot, because if it's a tight spot, usually we allow plenty of time to get those jobs done.
Yeah.
But just new materials is the biggest one. If there's a new material that I'm not familiar with, those are the ones you set up some test welds on before you go and strike an arc on the customer's part.
What are some of the new products that are rolling out here that you're seeing?
We don't get into a lot of exotics. I did get a chance to work on a little bit of titanium piping. Unfortunately, I didn't get to weld it, but it was titanium piping for a really strong acid. And the pipe was all new and clean, but it was an acid that was designed to eat stainless steel. So the titanium pipe that's a different animal. And I hope I get to weld some more in the future, but who knows?
Can you talk about what has been your biggest success so far in your career?
Getting my license early was one of them. Having that before I was 30. And I mean, most of the guys that are getting that license are to the age where they're office guys.
Yeah.
And getting that license early was big. And
that's huge.
It's not unheard of, but it was a big deal. And then it's kind of satisfying when you go into a customer's place of business and you start doing a job for them. And then halfway through the job, they ask you a question and they find out that you're the owner of the company and not just an employee. That's kind of fun. It's a weird thing to be satisfying, but it's
But
just
it
a
puts a
fun
feather in your
little,
cap.
yeah, it does.
I really like how you put that it doesn't have to be a big thing. It's the little things
Yeah.
Yeah.
that you find your success in. Yeah.
Yeah. And even the small jobs that things go well, they don't all go well, but the small jobs that go really well and the customer is thrilled are the best. When you can surpass somebody's expectations of what they thought was possible, especially since we're a relatively new company. We haven't been around for 50 years. And a lot of the people in our industry have. A lot of the mechanical contractors out there are huge companies that have been around for decades. And to come into that space and compete with them and win jobs and exceed customers' expectations on those jobs is a really good feeling.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So on that note, then let's go the opposite route. Can you share with us the biggest fail or thing that you would consider weakness, fail that you've had so far? And how did you move past that?
This one's a little tough to talk about. Full disclosure, I know how to pass an X-ray quality weld. I can do that. But my only experience with that had been in test scenarios where I was testing for a certification. And I got called on a job where every weld was going to be X-rayed. And production X-ray welds, or that pace, that having to produce them repeatedly over and over in a production atmosphere, I was humbled a bit. And I found out that I can do it. I just can't do it the way that I'm used to doing it.
Or probably at the speed you were used to doing it.
The speed was the big one. I needed to learn to slow down. I can slow down when I have a test, when I'm sitting in the shop and I have to produce a weld that is going to get sent out to be checked. But when I'm used to working at a certain pace and then I get asked to cut that pace in half or less
And
to
still
get the
pass
quality
your X-ray.
and pass, just to pass the X-rays. And it's not that my normal welds are bad. Just my normal welds don't have to pass an X-ray. And there's certain tricks that I learned on that job that are necessary if every single one is going to pass an X-ray.
Yeah,
so
that's a hard pill to swallow.
For sure.
Yeah, it was. And I think I learned a lot from that. There was a few really great guys there that were willing to let me watch on lunch break and talk about the technical stuff of what am I doing wrong here and where did I mess this up. And those guys that were veterans of that type of work were very awesome about being willing to teach me.
Yeah. And that's great that you were willing to take in that criticism and say, you know what, this is humbling, but I can improve from this. Knowing the situation you're in is huge. That observation is really difficult in a profession, especially when your profession is an art. Because wherever you're at, time and place matters. So
yeah,
in art,
absolutely.
I know that was a really good example. Have you ever doubted yourself, and what have you done to pull out of that doubt?
That made me doubt myself a lot, but it's always there. I mean, doubt it's a constant thing for most people. The thing with doubt is that there's always so much, goes back to the size of the scope of the industry, is that there's always so much to learn. Welding is such a huge field. There's no one person that knows everything. And I have to remember that sometimes, that nobody knows everything about it. So I shouldn't expect myself to either. And yeah, there's always that aspect that I can always learn something. So I might doubt myself, but if I do, I can learn how to do that.
I feel like a lot of welders really are expected to be a jack of all trades, whether it's farm machinery coming in to be welded or somebody wants some form jig put together, then the next minute you're TIGging. It's a jack of all trades industry.
It is.
And it's a hard job.
Yeah. And as an industry where you have to be, like you said, if you're a craftsman of something, you have so many hours dedicated to it, but each machine has their own certification and qualifications to being good at it. And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Yep. As far as my certifications go, I think I have 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah. Can you tell us what they are? What are the certifications that you can possess?
Oh, there's thousands of them that you can possess. I have a structural certification with shielded metal or stick welding. I have a carbon steel pipe for steam with stick welding. I have a downhill carbon steel pipe for gas piping for specifically like natural gas pipeline type stuff. And that's downhill because it's a cellulosic 70-10 rod instead of the normal 70-18 that I would use for steam pipe. So the different rods actually change the certification too. One certification is for a 70-18 and the other certification is for a 70-10. And then I have a TIG stainless pipe certification as well.
That's
I
awesome.
think that's all. Yeah, that's all. That's all.
Currently working on one, or are you hoping to get one?
There's none that I really need right now. I've got a job coming up where there's something in the spec about a certain certification, and I haven't dug into it enough to know that if we need to test for it or not. I say we because we've got one full-time employee, and if we do have to test for that, he'll have to test for it too. Certifications are funny because unless you're paying for the certification out of your own pocket, most of those aren't transferable.
Oh.
As a company, we have to own the procedure. And then any employee that comes in has to use our procedure to test. So if they take a test somewhere else, they're certified, but if they come here, our procedure might be different. So then they have to retest to our procedure.
So it's almost worth it to pay for your own, and then you have that wherever you would go in your career.
It is, but at the same time, if that certification that you have doesn't match the company's procedure that you're working for, then that certification isn't worth much.
Yeah.
Yes, it's nice to be able to say I'm certified, but a lot of saying I'm certified to a company that you're hiring to just means that you passed the test once and you can probably pass it again.
So I have a question. You talked about how math is important. So let's talk some percentages here. As a business owner, how is your time divided? Are you sitting at the computer a certain percentage of the day and in the shop a certain percentage of the day? Is it realistic to what you thought?
No. It is not. There's a lot of days it feels like it is not divided well. And I went into business for myself. That was in 2018. My expectation was that I would be in the shop 80% of the time and the field 20% of the time. And I would have no problem getting my office work done in the evenings. And it's actually flip-flop. We're probably in the field about 80% of the time and in the shop about 20. And I need to be in the office one day a week, and it's very tough to make that happen. But that's the goal. That's what I'm aiming for. Hopefully in the near future, we can make that a reality, but right now it's not happening and I feel very behind.
Darn office work. And when you say in the field, you're talking like on the road, on jobs that are somewhere else, not just in the office.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I'm talking customers' facilities.
Yeah.
Literally in the field. The other Friday night, we were fixing a digger hitch at 11 o'clock at night. It's a big variety, and that's the best part about it.
So of the time that you're in the shop, then let's divide those into percentages too. What percent of the time are you stick welding, wire feed welding, and TIG welding?
It changes with product mix. We don't stick weld a lot in the shop. What we're doing now, we're working on a bunch of stainless steel conveyors for a food processing plant. And the customer specifically hired us because they wanted them TIG welded.
Yeah.
So what we're doing now is all TIG welding. And I love it. It's great. But there are times where if we're building gates for a feedlot, we're not going to TIG weld. That's going to be wire feed just for efficiency's sake. A lot of it's about discerning what's required, what the expectations are, and what's required for whatever the end use is. Mm-hmm. If it's food processing, it's probably going to be TIG welded. Mm-hmm. If it's aluminum, our preference is to TIG weld it just for appearance reasons. And then if it's repair work, if it's in the shop, it's probably going to be wire feed. And if it's out in the field, it's most likely going to be stick welded.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we understand you spent a little time teaching high school students. What advice do you have for young people to make decisions about their future, as well as how would you encourage them to get into the trades?
The biggest thing I would say is whatever industry you're looking at going into, don't think of it just as what you know about it. I said previously that I learned a lot about the opportunities in welding in my second year of welding school. And the image in somebody's head of welding might be the local blacksmith shop, the local repair shop. That's all they do. And there's a lot of facets of this industry that most people don't even know exist. You've got that repair guy down the road to prototype shops at NASA. We just had an equipment setup tech come through for a piece of equipment we got, and he has set up equipment at NASA's lab where it was all temperature controlled, all just super high tech stuff, just for precision reasons, like maintaining certain temperatures just so parts don't grow or shrink by that thousandth of an inch,
Right.
type stuff.
Yeah.
And those are the parts of this industry that most people don't know are out there.
Yeah, it's just baffling. Kids are still baffled by the underwater welding scene and all the opportunities there. But I think when you just examine the technology that is coming into play, it's almost scary sometimes. It's like, wow, we're able to do that.
Yeah. And when I first started teaching, one of the first things I did was I went through and I had all my students list out all the careers that work with metal. And we came up with well over 35, I think. I don't remember the exact number, but I had 20 kids in class and we had no problem with every student coming up with something different. So there's plenty of different things out there, and it doesn't have to be welding. It could be machining. It could be metallurgist. I didn't know what a metallurgist was until I was well into my career, but it's an engineer that does nothing but formulate metal for specific properties.
Yeah, so many opportunities. Do you think with the robotic trend going on that there's still going to be the same need and drive for people to go into that career field?
The robotic trend is not taking away jobs. It's just enhancing the jobs that are already there and making them more productive. It's changing the way the industry is looking for people, because the industry is not necessarily looking for the people with 10,000 hours worth of experience with a welding gun in their hand. The industry is looking for people that know how to weld so that they can program robots effectively.
Yeah, very well said.
There's a lot of that sentiment in welding where people are concerned that robots are just cheap labor and replacing the less skilled labor, and they're not. It's allowing that less skilled labor to move up into those programmer positions and be more efficient. And with the labor market the way it is, a lot of that is companies have to, because they can't find the help.
Yeah.
Very true.
A lot of the open jobs I see in the welding community, and kids will come and ask me about this too. They're like, hey, I want to apply for this job, but they said you need a certain number of years of experience or a certain type of background. How do you encourage people to gain that experience if they are not able to apply for a number of those jobs that require it?
That's a tough one, because I don't know how anybody is expecting to recruit entry-level workers with experience. This is just my opinion, but a lot of the industry has a problem with recruiting because they expect everybody to have experience, or they don't want to have to train people. And that's not, I don't think it's been working.
Do you think the reason they're not doing that is because there's not enough qualified candidates that they feel that they should even invest the time in? Because employee retainment is so hard?
I think it's because the retention is so poor.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I don't know why the retention is the way it is. A lot of people look at welding as an entry-level career that is just until you find something better type of thing. There's not a lot of people that look at welding as a long-term career you can retire from.
Yeah.
I want to be very gentle about how I say this. The production fixture welder is probably not long-term career job type stuff. It's the specialty or the people that are willing to put in the work to move up and take the management roles or the one-off roles or the traveling roles for that matter, even the entry-level traveling stuff. The traveling roles are a great living.
And I think you nailed it on the head. Fabrication is repetitious, and sometimes it's just spot welding. It's very simple, and that's what we have issues with at our fabricating shop. So I think you stated that very well.
Absolutely.
The want to move up past that entry-level position is what's necessary.
Which I'm sure is a personal skill that you have developed throughout the years. And growing up on a farm, I'm sure you were given that a lot of times too. Do you have any advice for those people on how to move up from those positions? Because a lot of the times they have the technical skill, but maybe not that management experience or those soft skills that sometimes it takes to be inside of the business world. What advice would you give someone looking to do that?
just try to observe the people that are in those roles and learn as much as you can just by observation. A lot of it is observational learning and just watching what those people do. I know welders that have moved from welding to drafting all the way to the engineering department, just from job experience and observing and knowing what they needed to do. They've gone from the shop floor to an office and they love it. You
My
wouldn't catch
favorite
me in a
people.
cubicle, but
And that's okay.
yep.
You're still a business owner and in the shop 4 days a week. So
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I think we covered.
a lot of it.
You did such a great job talking about
You
it and
did.
the ins and outs. Self-employment's not easy by
It's
any
not.
means. Dealing with customers, learning the trade, working with employees, giving
Mhm.
advice to young people, being a teacher. Tell us, how on a daily basis do you keep it rural?
The shop is in the middle of a cornfield, so that helps. We're out in the country. We're not in town like a lot of shops are. Just a couple weeks ago, we had a ninth grade ag tour come through the shop and learned all about what we do. I've taught some community ed classes for welding. Turned out to be a pretty popular thing for a few years there. We didn't do one this year, but me and the local ag teacher teamed up and offered community ed welding classes in the evenings over
Very
the
cool.
winter. Being available for those late night repair calls, it's kind of essential in this industry and in this neighborhood that
Yeah.
those things happen, and being available or having somebody available for them is a big deal to the people that need that.
Yeah. But your willingness to do it is probably what makes your business stand out too.
I have a hard time saying no.
It's okay to say yeah. Or we can say it for you. That's okay too.
Okay.
I think everybody self-employed has a hard time saying no.
For sure.
There's always that fear of if you tell somebody no, they might not come back.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
Yeah. Justin, this has
Thank you.
been extremely enlightening. Even as someone who teaches welding classes, I have learned so much, and I'm thinking of questions as we sit here that I'm like, oh, I just want to pick his brain a little bit more. So thank you for sharing your expertise and a little bit of time with us away from the shop today. Your passion is very obvious and evident, and I hope that kids can pick up on that too and see the opportunities that are outside of the four walls of the high school that they're training in now and what the future really holds for them.
Yep.
All right. Well, Keepin It Rural listeners, we will see you next time. Thank you to Justin, and hang tight till we see ya. It's not a party without you there. Follow Our Crazy on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to check out all episodes and extras at keepinitruralgirls.com.
That's all, folks.